Hi there, I'm Matt from Newest Materials. Today we're going to do a really cool epoxy resin surface on this workbench. It's a great way to give a really high quality finish to a surface that might be a simple piece of timber underneath. So we've done some prep work to get to this stage. This is a 18mm sheet of MDF we've put into size, and then what I've done is around the edge we've just used a plunge router and just rounded the edge of the board. That's so that we don't have a really harsh 90-degree edge. It's going to help the resin just flow around, and it's just going to give a really nice high quality finish to the edges of our board. Once we did that, we hoovered all the dust and got it all nice and clean. And then we've gone in over the whole surface with stone coats epoxy undercoat. This is a white one, there's also a black one available depending on what kind of project we're doing. And we just apply that with a 4-inch roll. So rolling them on, try and keep it nice and neat and even. We want a nice surface throughout. So we're going to do 2 coats of this, do 1 coat, leave it to set for a couple of hours, and then come back and do a second coat, and leave that for probably a good 6 hours or overnight before you're ready to do your resin. Once the undercoat is set, we just gave it a really gentle sanding, just to take any furry bits off or anything like that. So we just went over the surface, we then clean that again, partly with the hoover, and also just got some isopropyl alcohol on a bit of rag, and just clean the whole surface, just to get the dust up. We don't want any dust that's going to get into our resin when we come forward. So the final bit of prep work that we need to do is just to run around the edge with masking tape. This is to create a bit of a dam or a barrier against the resin. So when we pour it, we're containing the resin on top of the bench. So we're going to come up maybe an inch or so higher than the edge of the bench. I'm going to wrap around it twice. This is only a temporary thing. When we pour the resin part way through, we're going to remove that tape and let the resin flow over the edge. So it's just to kind of contain it while we do our work and put our effects on, and then it will all come off. Okay, so we've got our masking tape all around our bench. One other thing to note is you really want to make sure that your surface is as level as possible. So I've got a spirit level here just to check that my bench is level. I've checked it in both directions and it's really nice. The reason for this is that we're going to be pouring liquid resin on here. It's going to want to flow in whatever direction it needs to get level. So if our surface isn't level, that can lead to thin parts or the resin flowing off too quickly. So do whatever you can do to make sure that your bench or whatever surface it is level. This one has come out really nice, but if I needed to, I can chop it up with cardboard or some boarding just to get it level before I start. Another thing that we've done is we've masked off everything. Particularly if you're working with a surface that's already in situ with cabinets or something around it, you want to make sure that everything is masked. Hopefully you won't need that to be the case because you're not going to make a huge mess, but if you do, you don't want to have to worry, and you want to make sure that all that work is done beforehand so you don't have any horrible things work to do afterwards. Our resin is going to flow off the edge of the surface, so we know it's going to get the floor around the bench. So we've got cardboard all the way around, and the part of the bench below the surface I've used like a cellophane wrap all the way around. There's a variety of things that you can use. You can use paper, you can use cardboard, you can use other bits of wood and put them in position. But whatever you do, you want to make sure that if the resin goes somewhere that you're not expecting, or if the resin collects anywhere, it's not going to affect the carpets, covers, or the surfaces like that. So do your prep work at this stage, and then when you pour the resin, relax, knowing that it's not going to cause any problems. Okay, so we've got all our resin ready to go. We're ready to do our pour. So we're going to be using Stone Coat's countertop epoxy. This covers 20 square feet per gallon. So this is a 1 gallon kit, this is a half a gallon kit. This bench is about 24 square feet. So I'm going to be using all of this kit, probably about half of this kit. Into those, we do a massive range of different powders. So these are metallic powders, we have glitter powders, we have pearlescent, we have glow powders, and various different metallics that you can put in to create whatever effect that you want to achieve. As well as this, you have pigments to mix into the resin. These will give you much stronger colours that you can use in different ways. It's really good to experiment with all of this. You can do a small board beforehand just to get a good idea of what you're going to get. The colours can be quite powerful, so less is more. With even a small couple of drops, you're going to get quite a strong effect. With this, we want quite a bright white surface with some accents in it. We don't want it to overpower. It's easier to start with something subtle and make it more powerful as you go on. If you start with something powerful, it's quite difficult to knock it back later. So be cautious and be a little bit conservative to start with. You don't want something to get really big and overpowered straight away. We've also got all our sundries to go with this. We've got gloves. You're going to want plenty of gloves because you're going to be getting pigment on them and switching them out as you go. You just have a hot box ready. We've got some containers, so we've got some buckets, and we've got some mixing cups for mixing different batches of material. What I'm going to do on this one is we're going to mix all the resin up at once, and then I'm going to decant it into smaller pots that I can do my little accent colours. So we're going to have a kind of blue section coming in a vein here. We're going to have some bright white, and we're going to have some slightly browned off white that we're going to just run through in different areas. And then we're going to use some silver powder as well to create an effect on the fly. We also have mixing sticks. You're going to use quite a lot of these, so crank is key here. You don't want to get halfway through and then find that you need something and you've got resin on your hands and you need to take those off and get something from that. Better than have everything you have to start. The one other thing that we do have is isopropyl alcohol as well. We're going to use that to smooth off the surface and create some cool effects. We put that in a spritzer bottle so that we can mix it over the surface as we go as well. So if you've got that all ready, it's time to mix some resin.
Give your resin a good shake in the bottles before you decant it. So if it's been sat for a while, it's good just to get the liquid moving, give it a good shake, all the bottles that you're going to use. Now here I'm actually going in with the part A first, but I'd recommend you do the part B first. The part B is a lot more liquid than the part A, so in terms of mixing, it's just going to make your life easier if you pour your part B in first. See, I've got my safety goggles on. I'm going to be using a drill with a paddle for this, so I just want my goggles on to make sure if any resin comes up out the bucket, it's not going to get me in the eye. So just starting with a slow speed, just moving those components into each other. I have a spare bucket that I can rest the drill in so I don't get all of the resin from the paddle all over the floor. I'm just getting some other cups here. So what I'm doing for this table is we've mixed one batch of epoxy and we're going to decant that into cups and then pigment them individually to make our accent colours. It's just an easier way of doing it so you're not having to weigh out individual batches. We've got a long time to set on this epoxy, so we've got plenty of time to mix before our epoxy starts setting. Just adding some white pigment in. This is going to form the main bulk of our table, so we're making a large batch of this. Just adding some silver powder now. I've got this in a little sieve container. You want to make sure that you don't get any lumps of powder here because that can remain and not get mixed into the epoxy. So sieving it, anything like that, just to make sure you give it a good shake beforehand, just to make sure there's no clumps in the powder. We're just decanting a good amount here. What we're going to do next is use a bit of copper spray to just knock some of that colour slightly in a kind of browner direction. I want the main bulk of this table to be the same colour, but I just want a little bit of natural variation, so we just put a little bit of paint in here just to create a secondary base colour that's very similar to my first. Now we're going in with black dye, and also we've got some blue metallic powder in this one. So these are our two stronger accent colours for the table. You really don't need very much for these amounts of epoxy. A little will go a long way, so even these small batches will be plenty to really give a strong accent to our table. It's worth trying out these things on a small board just to get an idea of how strong the colour is going to be. So we're pouring out our main batch, and this is our slightly pigmented with copper batch. The faster you can get these onto your surface, the better, because they will set faster in the bucket. Now I'm adding a little bit of my blue accent colour. We're going to create a streak or vein coming in from that edge of the table. Now we're working with a notched spreader, so it's a good tool to really quickly start to move the epoxy across the table. With these two similar colours, I haven't got to worry too much about marks from the notches. Once I get towards the blue section, I'm going to be a lot more careful about how I use that notch spreader, because I don't want to drag the colour out too much. That blue will really spread, so I'm being quite cautious to get the epoxy spread out over the rest of the table, working it towards the edges. We want to make sure the whole area is covered. There's a certain surface tension to it, so once you've covered a bit of dry table, it will help the epoxy to move over that area. So now I'm just starting to drag out the main blue area, but I'm kind of working back into it rather than dragging it out of the whole table. You can use sticks. I've switched to a large stick here. You can use different size ones. You can even use your hands if you have gloves on, just to work those materials together. It's going to self-level, so we don't need to worry too much about putting marks into it at this stage. But just be careful not to muddy up your colours too much. It's easy to overmix. Let the natural variation from the different materials we've put down shine through. If you overwork it, you can just create one even muddy colour, which is not what we're looking for. So I've switched to a smaller stick now, just to slowly work that blue into the surrounding colour, but giving me a bit more control as I go.
Okay, so we're partway through our pour. We've got all our major colour on to make sure the table is covered. The resin will continue to spread and layer itself out. We just want to make sure we're not going to have any gaps or any problem areas. I've put this blue kind of streak or vein coming through it, and I've just used a few sticks just to blend it out a little bit. So this is kind of our base, our starting point. We're going to just chuck a few accent colours on there now, just to give it a bit of interest. We'll use a little bit of silver powder and a shaker as well, just to start to make it pop and give us a little bit interesting things happening on the surface. But largely, we've covered everything, and we've used the vast amount of the resin that we can say. So as well as pigments, you can use spray cans such as this copper spray to add some colour depth to your resin. So you can just spray it into the colour, or you can spray it onto a brush, spread it in that way. You can use a hoover if you're not in a well-ventilated area to capture some of the vapour that comes off the spray, so you don't get that smell in the air.
So when you're adding these accent colours in veins, less is more. I'm starting with one most subtle colour, which just has the copper spray. Think about the direction you want your veins to run in, how thick you want them to be, and try and get an even spread over your whole surface. It's very easy to get carried away and end up putting too much on, so keep stepping back and have a look at what you're doing. Now I'm going to switch to my black colour. This is very strong, so be really minimal with this. A small amount will do plenty on the surface.
So to break surface tension and just allow those bubbles to pop and get out of the resin, we're just going to spritz on some isopropyl alcohol, so just create a standard garden spritzer, and we're just going to go on this over the surface. I would suggest just do a test spray some there first before you spray it out. Extremely good to make sure it's see, as I'm spraying this on, the bubbles are just instantly popping on the surface of our resin. Really nice fast way. It also interacts with the pigments and the powders you put in there, so you get some really cool natural looking effects just by spraying on the isopropyl.
At this stage, the resin's had a good chance to spread and level, so if you do have any areas where it seems to have missed or seems particularly thin, you can use a little bit of resin left from your bucket to just patch up any areas and make sure that you're not going to get any thin sections. Here I've got a little bit of silver powder in my sieve. You can just shake it on. Alternatively, you can mix this into isopropyl alcohol.
Okay, so between mixing colours, the bench has taken us around about an hour and a half, give or take. That's including time just to check around. We're taking our tape off, so that's allowing the resin to flow over the edge. We've got it all nice and smooth, and we're just going to let the resin continue to flow out over the edge. So that's still there, the rest, that doesn't matter. We're going to warm the room up ever so slightly. We're going to leave this overnight and come back and have a look at it tomorrow. Just bring a bit of heat to the room will just help us heal the floor slightly. Okay, our resin is set, so it's time to move on to the next stage. So what we're going to do is just very lightly sand the whole surface, just to key it up. We're going to put a top coat onto this, so we want a mechanical bond between this and the top coat layer. So we just want to sand. With a light sandpaper, we're going to use anything up from maybe a 220 grit up to a 300, plus 280 here. So we're just going to sand over the whole surface, and then we're going to clean it to remove any dust before we progress to the next stage. We've got one more trick up our sleeve before we go on to our clear top coat. These are marble sprays. This is a really, really cool product. It basically sprays thin, random natural looking veins like you find in marble, much finer than the ones that we're able to achieve in the resin, and you can spray it straight out of the can, so it creates veins. Be very careful which direction you go in. I'm going to follow the line of our kind of blue screen, but you might want to change that depending on your project and what you want the final look to be. You can try it on a small board as a tester beforehand. This product comes in 3 colours, so we've got black, white. For this we're going to be using silver because I think it just gives a little bit more of a subtle effect. If you want something more stark, maybe put black on for a white surface or white on black. It's entirely up to you. It's a really cool product. It's very, very fast. Less is more. You can always take a step back and have a look at it. It's only going to take 10 minutes for this to set before we can go in our top coat. So you can always spray a bit, go and make a cup of tea, come back and have a look at it, and if you want a lot more, you've always got the option. We've given our marble spray about 20 minutes to set, so now it's time to go with our clear coat. The clear coat is exactly the same countertop epoxy as in our colour coat, but this time we're not going to add any metallic powders or pigments. It's going to give us a really nice durable surface by increasing the overall thickness of the epoxy and also sealing our colour coat away from the top surface. It's also going to smooth over any texture that the marble spray might have given us. So we're going to mix this with the drill as before. We're going to apply it to the centre of the table. Then we're going to use a notch shredder just to spread it out evenly over the surface. We're then going to come in with a brush just to remove any marks, notch marks that you might have got from the shredder. particles that might be trapped under the surface of the epoxy. Unlike the colour coat, we're not going to take the edge this time. We're using a smaller amount of resin, so we're happy for it just to flow straight out and off the edges and seal the edges at the same time. Okay, let's mix some epoxy.
So we're going in with our part B first. This is a little bit more liquid. The part A comes out a lot thicker, so it's best to go in with your part B first. Get the liquid at the bottom of the bucket. When we come to mix, it's going to mix a lot easier. We've got our mixing paddle on the drill, just like when we did the colour coat, giving it a good mix. We're going to pour out from the centre. We create a kind of reservoir. Obviously, we've got no masking tape this time, so we're going to work from the centre so we don't lose any resin. And we're just going to initially start with our notch spreader, spreading out the main bolt to make sure we're reasonably even over the whole table. This is just an initial stage. So now we'll start to drag that out a bit more. You can angle your spreader to use those notches in different ways and to drag a little bit more of the resin. If you've got an area which has got a big lump of it, you can really drag with that spreader. Once you've got a good coating, start to be a bit more methodical. So we're working across the width here. If you come at it from both angles, and you've got a good chance. Try and by this point keep the spreader angled regularly, so don't kind of move it too much. Now we're just using a brush. Use a reasonably large brush so that you're not having to spend ages on this stage. And we're just kind of using the heel of the bristles, just pushing down. All this stage is for is just to remove those spreader marks. The resin will self-level, but we're just giving it a bit of a helping hand to make sure we get all those spreader marks out before it starts to set. So we're just using the back of the bristles and working the whole area. Once this is done, we're now coming in with isopropyl alcohol in a spritzer bottle, giving it a good even spritz. Try it out on an area beforehand and just work across the whole table. You should actually be able to see those air bubbles pop as it goes.
Our clear coat is all set, so this could be the project finished. We've got a beautiful smooth glossy surface and it's ready to go. However, Stone Coat also offer the ultimate top coat. Now this provides an even higher level of scratch resistance and it's available in gloss and natural finishes. The natural finish is somewhere between a matte and a satin finish. Now for this bench we're going to use it for filming videos like this one, so we don't want much reflection, we want it to be as matte as possible. So we're going to go with a coat of the natural finish, ultimate top coat. This is a 2:1 mix ratio. Before we apply it, we're going to use our fine sandpaper just to scrub up the top surface very minimally. We're going to clean any dust off with isopropyl alcohol. Unlike the previous layers, the ultimate top coat is applied really, really thinly. We're going to use a 4-inch roller. Make sure you've got a nice clean tray or a brand new one. We're going to mix the material up. We're going to apply it with a good amount of force on the roller so that we don't build any thickness. We're going to use one roller to apply it to the whole surface, and then before it sets, we're going to use a clean dry roller and just go back over the surface just to take off any excess material and just make sure we get the thinnest layer possible. This will take about 8 or 9 hours to set, and then we'll have a finished surface.
So removing some material from the roller before you start and just giving ourselves an even base coat. I'm using a fair bit of force here and just using a kind of V pattern to roll the material out without getting regular lines, horizontal and vertical lines. And then once we've done that with a dry roller, we're just going to take off what we can just to leave a very, very thin, fine layer.
So, our ultimate top coat is all set, and that is our surface complete. So now it's time to remove all the masking and wrapping that we did, get all the cardboard up off the floor, and just generally tidy around everywhere. If you're working in a kitchen or a bathroom, Just be extra careful not to scratch or damage any of your surfaces or appliances. Also, please dispose of your waste responsibly. We'll show you how you can get the resin out of a bucket so that you can use it as well. If you use plastic buckets or plastic cups to mix your resin, you can sometimes reuse them. So if you've got something where everything's cured inside, then just give it a good squeeze to release that thin film of resin from the sides, and then you can simply pull your resin out. And that's the project complete. We've removed all the waste, given everything a good clean, and put the table back in position. We've really enjoyed working with these materials. What we've created here is a relatively simple design, but with the powders, pigments and sprays that are available, this is a system that you can tailor to your imagination. We really look forward to seeing what designs you can come up with for your surfaces. Everything you've seen here is available from worktop resin